Hello, my name is Jordan Michael, and for my portfolio project, I will be discussing the life and work of Anne Hutchinson, one of the earliest feminists in American history. She was one of the first female Puritan spiritual leaders in the colony of Massachusetts, and defied the gender roles established there. She also began her own Bible studies and spread her own beliefs about the Bible, which led to her own eventual exile from the colony. She was an essential spark for the civil rights of women, and her actions and beliefs laid the foundation for the women's suffrage movement in the future, as well as the modern-day feminist movement. So, let's take a look into her story. Anne Marbury was born in Alford, England in 1591 as the third of 15 children to a discredited clergyman of the Anglican Church named Francis Marbury. He was discredited due to his continuous criticism of the Church of England, arguing that clergy members should be well educated in the church. For these remarks, he was sentenced to both prison and later on house arrest for these supposed crimes. During this time, Anne was raised from a young age to value education and was supported by her father when he taught her how to read. Through him, she became familiar with Scripture and the doctrine of the Church of England. It was also extremely rare for women in her time period to have any form of education, as it was specifically reserved for males in Europe. After the death of her father, she soon after married William Hutchinson, a fabric merchant at 21 years old. Her career as a religious leader was initiated after hearing the message and preachings of Minister John Cotton, who was an Anglican minister turned Puritan in Boston, England. Cotton's emphasized message to his congregation was that, in essence, man was destined to enter heaven from birth. However, man's actions are what lead them to hell. In a similar fashion to that of Anne's father, Francis, Cotton was suppressed for his outspoken beliefs by the Church of England. The Hutchinsons found his preachings to be profound, especially Anne. To show appreciation for this message, Anne began holding meetings/Bible studies within her own home, in which she provided her listeners with her own interpretations of various scripture passages. This was the beginning of her career as a Puritan leader. After realizing that the Puritan community was leaving England for America to expand on religious freedom from the Church of England, John Cotton then went into hiding and later on set sail to Boston, Massachusetts with his family. Anne Hutchinson, holding a deep respect and admiration for her minister, felt greatly troubled by this event and felt called to follow Cotton. A year later, the Hutchinson family, William Hutchinson and their 10 children included, sailed to Boston in hopes of staying near Cotton. After finally settling down in Boston, the Hutchinson family became very successful, especially with William's mercantile business, on top of which Anne became both a midwife and a nurse for the ill. They also became members of the First Church in Boston, one of the most well-known and prominent churches located within the colony. This church also housed John Cotton and his preachings, which helped Anne learn and interpret Scripture. Continuing where she left off in England, she held meetings and Bible studies within her home for all women of the colony to converse about Scripture, Cotton's preachings, and her interpretations of the Scriptures. Her meetings and studies became so popular that her following gathered up to 120 men and women. She became an unofficial preacher in this way and began to give her own theology and beliefs to her congregation. From these meetings, Anne began to create her own message for her new followers or supporters. The message was, the ability to enter heaven is available to everyone, depending on their personal relationship with God or their faith in Him. Sins did not really dictate where a person would go. This isn't an exact replica of her message, but it's something similar to that. She also criticized the Puritan society's dependence on their own interpretation/version of morality. These teachings became attractive and brought about more people to her congregation. However, they were in direct violation of Puritan doctrine, leading to anger from other Puritan leaders, including John Winthrop, leading to what became known as the Antinomian Controversy. For future reference, the Antinomian Controversy was a small movement that challenged the doctrine and the law of the Massachusetts Bay Colony leaders. It mainly focused on Anne Hutchinson's criticisms. John Winthrop, one of the original leaders of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and several other leaders found Anne Hutchinson's interpretations to be in direct violation of Puritan ideals. John Cotton was included in this group, as he feared that Anne was moving to religious dissidence. Any attempt to stop or prevent Anne's household meetings were ignored, and Anne continued to hold Bible studies. Soon after, Winthrop accused Anne of speaking out against Puritan law and held a trial for her. During her trial, she defended herself with biblical terminology and handled herself fairly well, until she stated that her interpretations came directly from God. This was deemed as an act of heresy by the leaders and magistrates, and she and her followers and her family were banished from the colony. With the help of Roger Williams, another Puritan minister, Anne and her followers founded Portsmouth in what is now Rhode Island. However, the Massachusetts Bay Colony did not stop, as they soon warned Anne that they would be coming over to take over Portsmouth for themselves. After her husband's death in 1642, Anne and the rest of her family moved to an area in what is now New York, which was under Dutch law. However, the Native Americans near there, the Siwanoy, I hope I'm saying that correctly, felt angered by the new settlers. Anne and the rest of the Hutchinson family were slaughtered by the Native Americans soon after their arrival in 1643. To give a brief overview, Anne Hutchinson lived with the goal of learning more about her role as a woman within the Puritan community, as well as spreading her own interpretations of scriptures to those who would listen. Although she lost her trial and was banished from her community, she still had a great impact on the future women's civil rights movement and the feminist movement. Thank you for listening and watching, and have a great day. Here are my sources.